What is buffer time? What is buffer time? Is what buffer time?
As always, that is a great question. What is buffer time, my buffer timers? We're here again, wrapping up our reviews on Strange New Worlds Season 2 with Hegemony. I am Dustin from Best of Trek, Worst of Trek.
I can't see the name I put in, but I know I've just put in all the names of the chief engineers I could think of and turned them into one name. Because I feel like this episode kind of is continuing this chain of let's mention all the really cool chief engineers we can think of. I didn't put B'Elanna in there, though.
Yeah.
Might have to fix that.
Well, I know
Go
what I
ahead.
did because I am Lieutenant Junior Grade Scott. Opinions no one cares about.
Yes. Okay, so just two quick pieces of Star Trek news this week. Strange New Worlds Season 3 is officially in production. They are filming stuff, finally.
Right?
I'd say we're probably 2025 till we see something, but they might surprise us by the end of next year. And the
I know
other
2024 isn't that far from now, but I'm still upset by it.
Yeah, it's after the last 2 years of Trek, like more than once a week on average all year. We're gonna go into a little bit of a drought, I think. But not from Prodigy yet. They have wrapped Season 2. Just awaiting whenever Netflix decides that they want to air it.
Now that would be a Christmas present.
It would.
Yeah, I'm surprised being as close to wrapped as they were, and now that they are, that we haven't gotten anything. We just know Season 1 will be up and going on Christmas. Okay, so Hegemony. Let's start with the softball questions. Is Ortegas the best pilot we've seen in Trek?
I've been doing some research on this subject because I may or may not be writing a crazy conspiracy theory about the female pilots of Star Trek. So it's hard for me because I think right now it's a toss-up between Mariner and Ortegas. Yes.
I think like she's definitely a great pilot, but part of it is also we feel that because as we just kind of keep beating this dead horse, that's all we know about her. That she is a great pilot. And yeah, she can back it up. And actually, yeah, really has in the season between like this maneuver and technically flying blind and among the Lotus Eaters when she didn't really know what she was doing.
Right.
She looks so happy here, though.
Right?
She's confident. She's happy. So she is at her best when she is, balls to the wall, about to crash into a goddamn planet.
I like that she takes risks when she doesn't even really need to, just because it would be interesting or fun.
Right.
I mean, even with talking openly about her feelings for Chapel, I think also falls into that category. I keep thinking
Jeed flies the ship.
I keep thinking, and pilot seat is my realm.
The one-note character, but she does it so well. And I mean, we've talked about it before. It has a lot to do with the fact that special effects and CGI have come a long way, and we can do more and make it look cooler. So it looks like she's doing way more than the pilots we've seen in the past. And either way, even as a one-note character, great at what she does.
And I love the little exchange where Pike says, "You've been requesting going on a landing party." And then he tells her what she's going to be doing. And she says, "Yeah, I have been. Why if I haven't been?"
Why am I
Sounds
doing
like a situation I would get myself into.
Right?
So what about Scotty? This is our first chronological look with the man, the myth, the legend, the miracle worker, Mr. Scott. How do we feel about this first appearance?
You know, it makes sense chronologically, but I couldn't help thinking, wasn't there a reference of sorts in the last season ender?
Yep.
Yeah. Spock's in a Jeffrey's tube somewhere, and like someone with a Scottish accent clearly handed him a tool.
Yeah.
And obviously we're supposed to be like, wait a minute, is that Scotty? Is he working is he on the lower decks of the Enterprise? But all in all, I would say, yeah, this is better.
Yeah, I agree with Norman. It's such a great look at him. I mean, he is all the engineers we've ever seen, like, really doing a good job. I mean, Scotty, he had a couple of moments in original TOS, but honestly, he was like on the bridge being the captain more than we saw him in engineering. So it's really nice to see his backstory in his younger days, and he is the O'Brien, the Tinkerer, he is Trip Tucker, he's a little bit of everybody here. It's great.
In fact, I'm about to resolve our bet. I do believe Scotty is shown more often in the captain's chair than Kirk. I believe that I'm about 75% done, and it's leaning in that direction.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, it just off the top of my head, I've always been like, man, Scotty he seems to be in command more than Kirk at DOS. And
if I wanted to look
at it, man, that's awesome.
If I wanted to look at, I think I have conflicting feelings. One about more characters being thrown into Strange New Worlds, because I really feel like Strange New Worlds has all these characters. I mean, I have to research every time I want to reference the ops, because they almost never use her name. And so it's like we have a lot of really interesting deep we could go into here. But instead, we're just going to shortcut and bring in Kirk and Uhura and Spock. And now, it just keeps building. I'm almost a little worried we're going to get like a new imagining of TOS when this ends, with these characters becoming the crew of the next crew of the Enterprise. I'm a little worried about it, because I wasn't a big fan of the 2009 movie either. Oh yes, and Hemmer was shortchanged.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Gosh. I think I heard someone say they wouldn't have a problem if they just rebooted TOS from here as a continuation of Strange New Worlds. And I guess, but you got some really, great characters that they brought in for this series that I honestly don't want to see go away. At some point, like if they did that, at some point, like, not to get back on it, but they're going to have to replace Ortegas with Sulu. And I don't know if I want that right now.
I mean,
I have a weird Scott question. Wasn't he like much older than Kirk?
I was just going to bring that up.
So seemed to be older than Kirk.
Because here he looks like he's barely 18.
Yeah, both James Doohan as the actor versus William Shatner was older, and the character in canon is supposed to be about 5 or 7 years. I can't remember how, but older than Kirk.
This actor is so young, or at least he looks very young and presents very young. And that was the other thing that kind of is, if you're gonna try to follow chronology and create a link between the two, like, you gotta still honor what's set up in TOS, even if you don't need to mention it. Like, if he's older, then he's older, and you cast unless maybe this guy is from Scotland or has the best Scottish accent they could find. I'm not really good at recognizing Scottish accents unless they're like way overdone. But maybe that's why there's nothing wrong with his acting. There's nothing wrong with him playing Montgomery Scott. But if we're doing it in a chronological setting, he should still be older than Kirk.
Yes. But yeah, I mean, what they do get right is both of those things that you just mentioned. He's a Scottish actor that can do that fake Scottish accent of Scotty. Also, it's great. I mean, it's on point. Other than the age thing, I think this actor is very on point with his portrayal
Oh
of
yeah,
Scotty.
absolutely.
Also, did Pelia teach every engineer?
Yeah,
And
that
some
seems
who-
to be the
At
joke.
this point, yeah, probably.
It's like every episode she approaches someone else who used to be her student. Like we had it with Una. I think she's talked about Hemmer.
Yes.
Like
Yep.
I think she's just taught every. I'm waiting for her to tell like a story about something that happened with Miles O'Brien once in a while.
Right.
Yeah, I was just
Yes,
thinking
how-
like maybe in some of the more like modern Trek, the like late 2400s, early or late 24th century, early 25th century stuff. I would like to find out that like she taught Geordi and that there's some line maybe here that she taught Trip Tucker. Stuff like that, because she's already thousands of years old at this point. It's not inconceivable that she's taught all of the great engineers that we know and love. That I hadn't thought about that, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
So how do we feel about Spock being the hopeful one in a situation rather than quoting how far the odds are against him as usual?
Because he doesn't want to admit that those odds are shitty when it comes to Chapel. And he's still right in the middle. I mean, this is right after I'm the X happened.
Yep.
So they're still in this weird place where they've never sat down and actually talked out the breakup. They just go, I guess we broke up. And so I'm not surprised we see him being more emotional in this episode, because I think it's also like I don't know, it's to the idea that forever, like, and that it's naturally coming to an end, but that they still don't know how to deal with that because they still have feelings for each other. One of the hardest things human beings have to do, other than like endure suffering, is walk away from a good relationship because you know it has bad elements or it's just not going to work out, or you're always going to be fighting, but you still love the person and you just gotta move on.
So as a follow-up to that, why is there a franchise-long history of Spock being the only one that can do the thing?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure what exactly about being half Vulcan, meant that he was the only one that could, what was it, put guidance rockets on a busted up saucer section?
Yes.
Pretty sure anybody could have done that. They have jetpacks. Ortega said so.
Though that can bring me to another thing this isn't really a question, but something that we had kind of a few of us had noticed towards the end. I mean, yes, they've got jetpacks here, but when him and Chapel are on the Cayuga towards the end of it, when it's about to crash into the ground, they're already at terminal velocity, and I don't think any like small jetpack system that they would have on their suits could slow them down enough. They would still be headed towards the planet like the ship and burn up. It's an egregious use of non-science in science fiction, I think. Del, you're muted.
Yeah.
Del, you're muted.
Or frozen. Not sure which.
Sorry. I was going to say, or maybe he had his magic shoes from Star Trek 5, the rocket boots.
Oh yeah.
Maybe he had those, or maybe like he had one and he gave one to Chapel so that they could like hold on to each other and have momentum. But anyway, I thought all
Either
that
way,
out when I saw this.
Really?
It's just the science of like they were going the same, if they were in a room at the same time and like they're not moving any more than the Cayuga, then that means they're going the same speed as it. And it would take an awful lot of acceleration to try and break free of that, and I don't think that's possible. I'm not a rocket scientist, so prove me wrong out there, but I don't see it being physically possible.
I actually have a friend who is a literal
Yeah.
rocket scientist, so I will contact
Okay.
her and see if she can answer it.
Indeed. That should be, yeah.
Because to me, that's a pretty egregious scene. But there's another one here that happens at the same time, and I don't
Which one?
have a shot of it for whatever reason. But where the hull of the Kyogre crashes into the planet, and Pike's there just watching it. They should have been
Fireball, that's
fucking
right.
vaporized.
That just,
And they're, like,
that just
right
came when I was
there.
rewatching it too, yeah. Like you
And
see
then
him turn
seconds
away
later,
and
they're
I'm
like, oh
thinking,
yeah,
wait,
we got it.
no, that's a lot of heat. Is that really going to leave them unaffected? Like
It
if he's
doesn't
lucky,
make
is he
any
going to
sense.
cook the Gorn eggs out of Batel's wrist?
Oh, they got to freeze them out.
All right.
Freeze
Probably,
him out.
I mean,
Freeze him
'cause
out.
they don't like
Way
the cold.
out.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll un-Harry Kim her before the end of the next episode. Or, I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't even have this as a question, but do you think Batel will make it into the next episode? Or do you think they'll kill her off as
Do you
some
mean
emotional
Pelia?
point for Pike?
Do you mean Pelia, or do you? Oh, you're talking about.
No,
Batel.
but Captain Batel,
Yeah. Okay.
Pike's
I-
girlfriend.
I think of her as Marie now that we know her first name.
Oh, that's fair.
I don't know. There's not a lot of tension between them. I mean, there's the obvious she's a city girl and he's a country boy type stuff.
Right?
I don't know if it doesn't have any spice in it for me.
Yeah, they could look at it as an easy out for Pike because, he knows he's going to end up in a beep chair anyway.
Yeah, I don't know which way they'll go with this. If they'll show us Chapel being awesome and finding some great way to get her, cured or get the Gorn eggs out of her, or if they're going to kill her and just, be another footnote in Pike's tragedy arc.
Yeah.
Well, this episode also made me think about the other representations of the Gorn. And if you look at Star Trek chronology, why do they have like Instabox Gorn fighting material? And yet Kirk is like wrestling a Gorn hand-to-hand combat. Like, where are all these things that they invented to make the Gorn, a lesser foe? Like, why didn't he have a magic box full of stuff for the Gorn?
I would say, okay, the box thing would have to be hand-waved a little bit because in that episode, in Arena, they just kind of get thrown into the battle with the Gorn, and then maybe he's caught up with escape and getting back to the Enterprise, and then I feel like his obsession kind of takes over because he almost burns the engines out going after them. And then when he gets to a point when he could actually do something about it, he actually can't because that's when the Metrons show up and they're just like, okay, you two are going to fight now, even though we don't want anybody fighting in our space.
I mean, honestly, I'm really glad for the Gorn redesign, and it's been fleshed out in a more realistic way, I guess.
I think it's an evolution,
better
but
term.
I'm really hoping we haven't reached the apex of that evolution, because there were some shots in this one it was like pretty damn clear it was CGI.
Yeah, where they,
Well,
as opposed to like the fun puppet thing that they did in the first season, which
Yeah.
I liked a lot, and then that costs a lot of money to do right, and a lot of time. So I understand why they went CGI here for sure, and I still like it. I will take this CGI off over the man in the rubber suit
Yeah, it's true.
every day of the week. But we had a question later on here, and I'll just bring it up now. But the box here, why wouldn't Laan, as the security chief with a specialty in the Gorn, be made aware of this Gorn protocol kit? Way to throw a new weapon system that no one's trained on into the mix during a crisis.
Right. That's a good point.
I really do also feel like this is a missed opportunity to tell the backstory. Why was she on this planet that was attacked by the Gorn? Why were they attacked by the Gorn? What kind of trauma did she experience? And And why does she feel the way she does now about them? This was a total missed opportunity. They just keep going back to these minor references of like, you know about the Gorn because of the terrible thing that happened to you that we're not going to talk about right now.
I mean, to be fair,
Not
I think
entirely.
they've fleshed that out pretty well, and I don't know what there is left to tell.
Yeah. But yeah, she should have known about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's like the expert on the Gorn that the Federation has in security. And like I can understand if it's a lockdown thing where only like her, Pike, and Una know about it. But why she wouldn't be like checked out on these weapons and things beforehand? It bothers me just a little bit, especially where she's like the specialist. But so go ahead, Scott.
Along the lines of these weapons, should we have realized by the time we got to the end that there was going to be a part 2 to this? Because I was just thinking, they have these grenades that will like, flash freeze a Gorn in 10 seconds or like anything within 10 meters or whatever, but they never used them. And, the first thing that came to mind is, well, those are, they should have been Chekhov grenades. You bring them up, you're going to use them. So the fact that they didn't, because I don't clearly remember that they did, like, should we have realized that, I will be using them at a different point, apparently 2 years from now?
That's a very good point.
Speaking of using them for no apparently good reason, I want a Star Trek comic book series entitled Action Man Sam. Just watching this, some of the shots, like he gets really into this like classic 80s, 90s action hero kind of feel in this episode, which is more than I've felt from Sam to this point.
I also felt like this could be a callback to TOS when they would either have a red shirt or like they would find a xeno-social archaeology person who happens to work on the Enterprise, and they bring them on the away team, knowing that that's not going to go well. And I felt like this was a little bit of a callback to that. Like we brought the xenobiologist, but he's mostly just kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and he was like the only one keeping up with Scotty in his like crazy kind of rants. All right, so there are 3 moments, maybe really even 4, that seem like complete ripoffs of other movie franchises. Can you just hear Sarah Connor banging on the fence here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I can't see it and not think, but even the first time, like before I knew that the Gorn were coming, it's like, oh, wow, all right, something bad's going to happen. So the next one that I had noticed, did the Gorn showing up right after that, casting a shadow over the colony, feel like the Independence Day when the ships were like first?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. Like almost identical to the way it came out of the clouds.
I might be thinking of the wrong movie, so don't kill me forever, but I also believe there is a shot like that in Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're looking up at the aliens and his face slowly goes dark. Yeah.
I guess the third thing, it was just like, is this the most Resident Evil survival horror moment in Trek? Or does that go to like the Zombie Vulcan episode in Enterprise?
Oh.
I definitely felt like this was a return to their attempts at a horror episode. And what I liked about this one is it was much more tension and much less gore. I feel like the first episode with the Gorn, it was just like mostly gore, never mind. You know what I mean? Yeah. Gore. Gore and Gorn. The Gore. Yes. That this one was much more like He's right behind you. He's right behind you. Rather than just, I'm going to stab it and blood's going to go everywhere.
Yeah, and they get a little tropey when like they first show up and there's the massive shadow that comes over the colony. And then of course the next time you're on the planet, it's immediately nighttime. I'm just thinking, like, did it have to go immediately dark? Like, do you need to establish that kind of tone? We know what's about to happen.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Because then there's the third thing. I've never seen the Aliens movies at all, but isn't this here like basically a ripoff of Aliens or Alien?
I did notice that the creatures did look very Geiger-esque.
Yeah.
Like they definitely took some inspiration just from Geiger's art in general, but probably from Alien too. Maybe all these references were on purpose. I mean, Star Trek has been known to be self-referential all the time. So maybe it's just like, yeah. So maybe this could be just like, yeah, it's like these other good movies that you like.
Yeah, it seemed to not just like pay homage to some other franchises, but just straight up rip some stuff off. And it does it well, but it feels like more than an homage.
I mean, yeah, this is a pretty good fight, although I'm starting to wonder about like the rules of fighting in zero gravity because Spock's moving kind of slowly and then the Gorn's moving slowly, but then the Gorn can move quickly and I feel like the Gorn was working its tail a lot quicker than Spock could pull a phaser.
Yeah, this whole fight, I think it might be one of the better looks at zero-G fighting in Trek. I think it's like much better than like in First Contact on the outside of the ship when they're fighting the Borg. I think they did it better. It looks more like a real zero-G environment, but then I just like the whole fight in general. I generally don't like it, and I don't like this whole thing with Chapel being the sole survivor, just to satisfy canon. I mean, yes, I want to see her survive, but it's so improbable and impractical. But then it gives Spock to be, like I said before, then it gives him a chance to play the other side of what he always does, where it's like, oh, but the odds are like 3,673,000 to 2. So, with the Gorn being teased in the first episode of the season, why didn't Starfleet do more to keep their personnel out of harm's way on the border?
Well, wasn't the border established in this episode, though?
I'm almost certain
I guess.
Yeah, I'm almost certain it was like outside the Federation or something. Something Battelle was saying about it at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, this colony that they were at is just outside the Federation, and I'm still unclear. Are these humans? Is this a human colony that's now like trying to reintegrate into the Federation? Or is this just one of those many humanoid races that are exactly human?
You just didn't notice their weird eyebrows. They must have had weird eyebrows or something. Because how subtle can you make an alien not look like a human? They've already done ear caps. They've already done all kinds of things. But I think in this one, it was, yeah.
Yeah, I wish we had, in the last episode, gotten April's lovely baritone.
Right?
But competency, yeah, he's a thing for an admiral. Not the best or worst we've seen in Trek, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's definitely not a badmiral. But at the same time, not a dadmiral. So what's like the midpoint between those?
A regular admiral.
Yeah. Admiral.
Should the phrase "hope is a choice" be the unofficial tagline for Starfleet?
I feel like it's something that is pulsing in the scripts that they write and the stories that they tell, but I think this is the first time they've summated it in such a good sentence.
Right. Yeah, I saw something recently saying that I think I posted in the chat. It was a picture, of all the Star Trek crews. They're just saying, Star Trek isn't talking about being a perfect future. It's about people striving to be better and continuing to do so throughout the centuries, whether it's, 2 steps forward and 1 step back the whole time. So yeah, hope is a choice is about as good as, if you want to quote someone in particular, go with, I guess, Alexander Pope and say hope springs eternal.
So there was a kind of a weird thing that happened towards the beginning, as the Enterprise arrives at Parnassus Beta. They get a communication from outside the jamming field. How does that work? If you're in the middle of a jamming field that's generally like jamming pretty much everything, how are you getting a signal from outside that field?
I think you have found a logical fallacy here because I can't think of anything.
Whoops.
Yeah, there's a few of them in this episode. Like we've talked about the bad science, and this just seems to be another one of them, where it just doesn't make a lot of sense. You like, oh well, being jammed, but only here you can like get stuff from outgoing mail.
I think the one for me was like Sam walking into that meeting because Pike was like senior or command staff ready room now, and then they're in like the middle of the conversation. Sam just walks in like, "Hey, I'm here too. I want to kill the Gorn." Always happy to see Sam, but like, how was he allowed in?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
How do we feel about the use of the reorchestrated version of the classic fight scene music from TOS when they fight the Gorn here? I.e., like it's a reorchestrated version of the one where like Kirk and Spock fight in Amok Time, and it's done by Jim Carrey and the Cable Guy. Ding, 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 ding.
I think I don't mind those references. Like if it's subtle enough, then it's not like a glaring sort of, what do they call them? Member berries or whatever. It feels just more like, we're going to just shove this thing in this corner here, and maybe you'll notice it.
I really never noticed the music, except for when I like just summarized Amok Time. So yeah, if that happened, honestly, don't remember.
Yeah, it's a little slower and a little more in the background. It's not quite as in your face as they make it in TOS, and that is like, it is truly one of the most like in your face kind of pieces of music in like all of TV. I don't know that I like it. I don't hate it. It's fun, and you know right where it's from every time you hear it.
Right.
Well, we're back on the Gorn fight. I think this was the one that I meant about aliens, and not
Yes.
necessarily the other one, where it's like, isn't this like just directly ripping off?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
basically, yeah.
Never even seen the Alien movies, and I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, neither have I. That's why I was like, is it Alien? Which one is it? Where it's basically this exact shot,
Right.
and then you see it in all the memes and stuff too.
No, Dustin, you're thinking of Spider-Man, except one of them isn't upside down.
Yeah, that too. It's very similar to all of these. So towards the beginning, Marie calls Chapel Christine. Do you think they're friends outside of Starfleet? It seems very familiar.
Like sometimes when you know that they're friends, like Pike calling Una rather than, number one or whatever. But this was just two characters that I don't think we ever knew each other, and they're immediately going by first names, which I thought was a little odd.
That is fair. Was that both sided though? I mean, sadly, I just watched this morning. Can't remember.
I don't remember. I remember that.
Yeah, I don't think she addresses Patel at all.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that could just be the privilege of a higher rank.
Speaking of ranks, why does Scotty refer to the rank as lieutenant instead of lieutenant?
You know, technically he shouldn't, as Scotland is definitely not part of the British. Well, no, that's not true, is it?
It just seemed, I almost wanted to go back and see if Malcolm makes references like that either, but they go to such lengths to follow a hierarchical standard that we understand.
Mm-hmm.
And this just seems to come out of nowhere.
Yeah, I don't think the previous iterations of Scotty or anybody else, like Reed or anybody, have used it like that. I mean, it doesn't seem, if anybody's going to do it, I guess Scotty's the character to do it. But yeah, it is a little out of place in the Star Trek universe, I guess. All right, so
and I'm wondering if Reed did it.
You might have to help me with this one that you wrote, Del. Were attitudes about colonies technically outside of Federation space not considered worthy for protection against a much bigger, more malicious foe, just because they don't want to get involved in a war?
I don't remember another time except for, I don't even know if I would count that, where a colony was in trouble.
Oh, okay.
And Starfleet said, "Oh, don't get involved." Like, it's very rare, except for like, don't cross that boundary, don't go into the neutral zone. But it's rare that they tell them not to give a shit.
Yeah, and to like not even try to rescue their own people. That's the part that I got thinking was kind of weird. Like, we're not even going to go in to get our own people, and then we'll deal with the Gorn.
I mean, how many times have we heard Starfleet officers say "no man left behind"?
Mm-hmm.
And they're telling, and then Starfleet is telling them, "No, don't cross that border. Don't go get them. Like, you'll get in trouble." And I'm just like, that doesn't sound like Starfleet to me. Starfleet is like, "Oh, you're in trouble. Let's lend a hand. Maybe you'll join the Federation if it goes well."
Yeah, I'd like to say this is because it's pre-TOS and it's almost the oldest, and maybe this is something that led to that decision. But then sitting here trying to remember anything that happened on Enterprise, that's what you're talking about, and I don't know.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in the age of deep space exploration, Archer was definitely ready to help people out if we thought it would benefit them.
Yeah, but Archer was blazing the trail. He had some leeway. He could kind of do whatever he wanted as long as it didn't result in an actual genocide. That was their fault.
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to a question I didn't have on the list. Towards the end, about a weird command decision. I thought it was weird that here at the end, they're being attacked, but Uhura's like, "Do you want me to get April on subspace?" It's like, we've either got to get out of here, go after them, and the third alternative is let's pause and while we're being attacked, and let me call the Admiral. Like, really? And I kind of get where Pike's like not making the choice here. And I don't know if I love or hate this ending. It almost feels like one of those endings like Best of Both Worlds, where it's like, you know, fire, and now we're waiting for the resolution on that. But at the same time, I hate that he's like pausing for so long, and there are so many choices that aren't immediately, we've got to fire back or get the fuck out of here. And that Una's not stepping in like, hey, if you're not making a decision, I've got to. Somebody's got to do something.
Right.
It made me think of, and random, like when people call 911 because someone is choking or is unconscious or whatever, and they think that's the beginning and the end of what they're supposed to do. is just call 911 and see what they tell them to do. Whereas, like, even if you call 911 and put them on speakerphone, you can at least start chest compressions if you think that's appropriate. Or you can just make sure they're in a good position. There were times I called 911 when my ex-husband had a seizure. But those were when they lasted longer than they were supposed to, or if we had more than 2 or 3 in the space of a day. Whereas when we first got together, I was calling 911 every time he had a seizure. Until finally I went to the emergency room and, like, here are the 4 steps you can take before you call 911.
Right.
And so that's what it gave me, this sense of, like, I could act, or I could put the blame on somebody else by basically landing my situation into their lap.
That's fair. I think what I didn't like about it, besides the fact that, like, right before this, they had gotten orders to retreat, which was fine, and they probably should have. But then, the Gorn are closing in, they're getting attacked, and we just, focus in on Pike, who looks like he doesn't know what he's going to do. And there's been people complaining about him being, like, an indecisive commander in war. And, like, were you not watching Discovery when, they took on control? Like, he knew what he was doing then. I don't know why they made this decision with his character now.
Well, because his girlfriend's involved. There's feelings. That's
also true.
Before it wasn't personal in Discovery.
I'm telling you, this whole episode made me think of, I had the name, Worf and Jadzia go to rescue a Cardassian spy, and Jadzia gets injured.
Yeah.
Way of the Warrior?
Yes. And it made me think of that, because we have 2 characters who have deep emotional attachments to other Starfleet officers, one of which is on the same ship.
Yep.
And seeing how that changes their behavior. And maybe that's what leads to the final decision when it happens to Worf and Jadzia, where they just go, okay, you guys can't serve on away missions together anymore. We even saw it with Picard and the piano lady. Like, at the end of that episode, she has to send the piano lady out to, like, burn to death or whatever. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And that, again, him, like, Picard going back to the idea that, like, fraternizing, thank you, with other officers either on the ship or in Starfleet in general, like, I don't know. It feels a little wishy-washy to me.
All right, just a couple more questions to wrap up here. Do you get the sense that Ortegas is one of the Starfleet officers who signed up for more for exploration than war or protection? Oddly enough, I don't. She's one of the only ones that, I mean, she hates clearly what she went through during the war and the stuff that happened, but she's a little more gung-ho about it than most of the others. Where, like, Chapel just completely retreats into herself when she has to think about it. Ortegas is like, no, fuck this.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, actually, I think she is very much a warrior at heart.
I put it in there because I feel like Strange New Worlds kind of blurs that line a little bit, whereas in some of the other franchises, it's kind of obvious whether they signed up for exploration or if they signed up for war. You can see it even especially throughout DS9, where when the Dominion War begins, not everyone jumps in and is like, this is my new priority.
Right.
There's just some people who are like, can I just be in my lab, like, playing with mushrooms, please? Like, don't bug me with this war shit. Like, I feel so. I'm playing with this idea in my head in general, so that's why I put the question in.
Yeah, it's also entirely possible that she did join Starfleet just to be able to fly, but that her experience in the war brought it out of her. Like, yeah, she's an excellent pilot, but, she's also a crack shot, and, she just found her niche, and now she fits in it.
The pilot seat is her realm.
Yeah.
She flies the ship.
She does fly
Flies
the ship.
All right. I mean, I think we know the answer to this one, but in this current time where Star Trek shows are getting surprise canceled and removed from services, why in the heck would they end this in a cliffhanger? And Del, you had written Lower Decks. Is it? Am I
Well, because
misremembering? There's
Tendi
no. Oh, I guess there
disappears.
kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't
Okay.
say like to be continued, but Tendi disappears. And imagine, I know that they are already working on the next season, but imagine if they didn't have the green light for that. We would never know, except, oh, well, I guess Tendi went back to the Orions, the end. And so I feel like both this and Lower Decks are left in this sort of liminal space, which is constantly threatened by what's happening to the other franchises. And obviously Prodigy being the most obvious.
Yeah.
But also like when things moved from Netflix to Paramount Plus and it became harder to access, and you get
Yeah. I don't know. Do they think they're safe at Lower Decks? Because every episode, every season does tend to end with something pretty serious happening.
Well, I mean, up to this point,
Almost.
Lower Decks
Except for
has
3.
known that they were gonna keep having another season, but beyond season 5, there is no word yet on a confirmed contract. We don't know if this next one is the end, but they've known before the end of each season that they were gonna get another one until now.
Yeah.
Same with Strange New Worlds. And I mean, the real answer to this question, is, especially where Strange New Worlds is concerned, is that it finished filming more than a year ahead of when, we saw it. And it was written even longer before that. So they didn't have the writer's strike or anything else, in their mind. So it was just getting back to Star Trek as normal, because it's actually been a while since we had a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But now we're sitting here waiting on the longest cliffhanger in Trek history. Yep. What you got in the ticker there, Scott? Exactly that.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to make a callback to Rocket Boots since we're talking about cliffhanging, but I don't get the sentence. So there it is. There's something about the two of those things that make me giggle. Oh, because when Spock wears the rocket boots, it's to save Kirk, who's trying to free climb. So that's when we said cliffhanger, and we had just talked about that. It got cut in my head again.
Nice.
It's literally hanging off the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
This is totally ridiculous. It's from a kid show that used to be on PBS called Between the Lions. And it was this very little animated series about a guy literally named Cliffhanger who is hanging from a cliff by one arm. And in every episode, he comes up, he's got like this survival thing that, he pulls out of his backpack and reads, and it's like, oh, if you want to get out from the cliff, you should do this. And then he tries it, but then he just winds back up hanging from the cliff. Even the one time he managed to get down, everybody's like, aren't you a cliffhanger hanging from a cliff? I'm like, yeah, I used to be. So he goes back because I guess that's just all he knows. And this is literally half of the theme song. Anyway.
What I will say about cliffhangers in Trek, a lot of the episode ones have been kind of underwhelming. Like, yeah, they've been good setup and they're usually serviceable. But if you separated part 1s and part 2s in general rankings, a lot of the part 1s would be way further down than the part 2s. I don't necessarily get that sense out of this one. It's hard to say, not knowing what part 2 is going to bring for us, but that this is probably one of the best part 1s of anything in Star Trek ever in a 2-parter.
I mean, if I had to speculate, something's going to happen that's going to knock the Gorn back to like their version of the Stone Age and end up. So, we end up with the kind of Gorn that we saw in Arena. But after that, who knows? Oh yeah, Batel will probably die.
Yeah, I think it would play into the into Pike's Greek tragedy thing that he's got going on for an arc. Any other speculation for episode 2?
I don't have a speculation, but I have a very strong wish, and that's they could fight someone other than the Gorn once in a while. Like, I get TOS had Klingons and Romulans, and everyone's had sort of an enemy. I don't find the Gorn on the same level because they can't, like, there's no ending. It's just we're going to have to kill them all, which again goes into the morality of Star Trek, and we can talk about flux and deciding someone's, entire planet's future, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm really hoping that, like, it turns out that the Orions are working with the Gorn, and the Orions are the actual enemies or something. But yeah, I mean, I want an enemy that can talk and be cunning. And
Tholians, that is a great thought.
wow.
We have not had
That's
enough
true.
Tholians in our
That's
life.
true.
All right.
Yeah, I think I would even submit to Tholians because at least they're, especially from Mirror Universe Enterprise, they're very interesting. It's an interesting race.
Yeah.
Aliens and their webs.
So, let's put this one to an out of 10. Going into this, I was thinking this was a pretty mediocre, like 5 or 6. But honestly, on rewatching it here after months of taking in all the rest of Strange New Worlds again, it doesn't hold up to the Big 10 of those old scientists, and it doesn't reach quite as hard as Subspace Rhapsody. But man, it is probably Trek's best first part of a 2-parter. I mean, there's action all the way through, even if there's bad science and some of it's very contrived. Like, I really don't like Christine being the sole survivor of the Kyoga. It bothers me to no end. But aside from that, the story's pretty great. It's good to follow. It's great TV. And I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Dustin, you have to stop reaching into my brain to find your numbers. You can just ask before the show, and I'll tell you what my number is, and then you can use it before me. But I had a very similar experience. I do not like Star Trek at War. It is my least favorite kind of Star Trek. I don't mind if it's like, oh, we have a space fight and then it's over. And obviously my favorite one is DS9, but that's because I think it's approached very differently. But I liked this episode more than I thought I would, and give it a lot of points because I think doing a musical is an obvious big swing. But I think doing like thriller horror is also a big swing. It's just not as noticeable. So yeah, I would go with 7.5.
Yeah, you got it already. I don't know. Along the way, I totally forgot to rate this. I suppose, I guess we got to rank it on its own as opposed to being a part 1 of a cliffhanger, because that brings it down a little bit, because we just don't know what's going to happen. The Gorn continue to be a little bit overpowered, but it's cool that they seem to have maybe figured out a way to beat them. Not particularly enthused with the fact that they've kind of set Pike's love interest up to die, or that Spock and Chapel are still doing will they, won't they. I think all in all, I would, probably do exactly the same and go with 7.5.
Consensus.
We're a
Come on, Norman, you can bring it down 0.5. You can do it, Norman.
0.5. I don't know. They didn't use Uhura enough or something.
Yes.
And that's a 7.63 as an average.
So close.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I want to feel like it's an 8 or an 8.5, but then I got to take all those science-y problems into account. which just don't make sense. And
Yeah.
but it's still so much fun. I mean, I can't think of another first part of Trek that like really just kind of hit it. And well, okay, wait, maybe past tense in DS9 where they go back to 2024, because that's hitting really goddamn close to home right now.
Yeah.
Same here.
So before we like clean up any maybe final questions here,
No.
we've got a fair amount of viewers. I just want to remind everybody we are going to do Christmas next week. We're going to try and tie in little bits of Star Trek, but we are not going to do Star Trek. We're going to do we're going to review some of our favorite and least favorite Christmas movies and Christmas specials, and the Christmas specials are turning out to be, well, a thing. If you have to attach the term holiday special or Christmas special to something, it's probably not very good.
Well, we'll see.
But I'm
Dell's
super
been watching all
excited about
kinds
it.
of crazy old
Yeah.
stuff.
I've been picking because I wanted to find things that were unusual. So I've done things like watch the Mary Tyler Moore Christmas special. I've watched a couple of those, like a famous singer hosts a bunch of guests at his house and they all perform. I've watched a couple of those. Right now, I'm really in love with the Muppet Family Christmas because it has Muppets, Fraggles, and Sesame Street characters in it. And they're singing typical like carols. But anyway, that will be more information. That's your teaser for next week, that I've been watching some really crazy, weird, out there Christmas specials.
I made it through the Star Wars holiday special for the first time in my entire life. I've never been able to make it through the whole hour and 37 minutes, and it is excruciating, and I can't wait to talk about how bad it was. All right, so back to any final thoughts we might have on Hegemony. Or did we done cover it all?
I think so.
Seriously, I really want Action Man Sam. I'm just throwing that out there into the ether again.
And you want a comic book version of that, right?
I think it would make the most sense. Really like B-roll comic book kind of thing.
So noted.
All right. Well, I guess we covered this pretty well. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank my co-hosts for showing up here. And we will be back with you with some Christmassy type stuff next week. Until then, live long